Who were you before you lost your wild self?
That's what we're helping you explore on the Tend Her Wild podcast.
Through questions and tools around how best to listen to your inner voice,
rewild ourselves, and live the most authentic life where we thrive instead of survive.
I'm Betsy.
And I'm Kate.
And we're so glad you've joined us for this episode. Hello, Tend Her Wild podcast listeners. We are thrilled to have a very special guest in our studio today. Mary Jane Knight is with us. She is a classically trained vocalist, composer, and educator dedicated to using music as a vehicle for healing and empowerment. She's in the right place today. Drawing from her background in opera, church music, and music education, she bridges the worlds of music therapy, emotional wellness, and accessible artistry. She has a music education degree from Simpson College and a vocal performance degree from the University of Nebraska. She's passionate about helping others find and amplify their voices. She does this in her studio, Nightingale Voice in Iowa City, and through her newly released, deeply personal and healing-focused album, Rising Free, A Journey of Healing. Welcome, Mary Jane.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
We're so excited to have this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. It feels really timely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So we love to start, Mary Jane, with a little bit about your first 10 years. We have found when women kind of look back and look at some of their formidable years when things are, maybe you're experiencing things for the first time or you're most connected to your inner self when we were young. What were those first 10 years like for you? And what do you remember about them that maybe jumps out at you as significant?
Well, I was raised by a teacher and a preacher. So I was born in Northern California, in Fortuna, and I lived there just for a little bit of time. So I don't remember much of it. But then we moved to Texas, and I lived in the panhandle of Texas. And my father was the preacher at the First Presbyterian Church, and my mother stayed home with us then. And I remember definitely, there's even videos of me singing on the front porch in the heat with my little microphone and my little thing with like all 4 verses of Mary Had a Little Lamb at the top of my lungs. And church was also a big part of my life. My mother would play the guitar and sing with all the kids in Sunday school, and we would sing "This Little Light of Mine" and all those old standards. And then we moved to Oklahoma, and we lived in Lawton, and another church, a little bit bigger town. And I just remember elementary school, not a lot, but boy, once I got to pass that 10-year-old mark, then those memories get
a little
bigger.
Get bigger?
Yeah.
Is there anything, we don't need to limit it just to the first 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Are there other things from your childhood? We just see that there's always this through line, like who you are now as an artist and a musician definitely had its seeds clearly in your early years.
Yes.
Were there other significant things?
Well, you know,
my tens and teens.
Well, I was thinking also about my grandmother, who she was the one that made me sing my first solo in church. And
How old were you?
I was probably about 9 or 10. She said, "It's time, and you need to sing a solo." And it went, and my grandparents are Church of the Brethren, and they lived off of the farm, and they had a farm in Kansas. And so a little tiny, tiny church town, and I was nervous, but she made me sing.
What do you remember?
Yeah,
it was a hymn. It was nerve-wracking. But then I remember my second solo was probably in 6th grade in the church musical. And that's when I remember being terrified, absolutely terrified. And the woman that directed the musical, as I grew up and I became very involved in singing in the community, she would remind me, you remember how nervous you were in 6th grade?
Yeah.
You remember how you were just shaking up there at the front? So
she would say, "Look how far you've come."
Yeah.
Do you still get nervous when you perform?
Yes.
Yeah, I do think it's,
It's it's sharing your soul, I believe. So it's a definite vulnerable kind of experience. And so it's very, I think if you care, then you're going to be a little bit nervous
Yeah.
if you're connected. But I also remember singing in church with my mom, and she was a wonderful singer. And we would have the hymnal out, and she would follow along with her fingers so that I could, know how to read. And then eventually, then she would start singing harmony while I would sing melody, and then eventually, then I would start singing harmony, and
I
that
have
we
those
grew up.
same memories of singing
Music in
in
the church.
church. And yeah, I was a musician as well. And it all started in the church choirs and playing the piano and singing harmony during the hymns, finding the harmony. So you're so speaking to me right now.
And then my poor family had to endure me playing and singing at the top of my lungs on the piano just over and over and over again in middle school and high school. I'd sit there and just
Hours.
And just
oh
play.
yeah, top of my lungs. Even our standard poodle would howl along with me.
So then did you approach your college years with the desire to be a musician, or did you have a different path?
Definitely. By the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was like, I am going to do music in college. And my dad said, "Oh, I think you're being called to the medical field."
That's what all dads say. You should be a doctor or a lawyer.
That's right. That was the
I just
message.
see that you're being called to the medical field. And I said, "Dad, why would I want to go to school for medicine when I can go and sing?"
Yeah. You already knew where your heart and
Oh,
your
yes.
gifts and your energy was. Yeah.
Yes.
And you ended up at Simpson College, which I know has a very amazing opera program,
That's
correct?
right.
I've gone and listened to their operas in their summer series.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about that and then your further education after college.
Sure. So I auditioned all over, and I kind of fell in love with musical theater in high school because I didn't have exposure to opera, but my voice was huge. And
Big voice.
the musical theater schools weren't so interested in me, and I couldn't dance. And then I went to audition at Simpson College, and I got a handwritten letter from Dr. Robert L. Larson, who was the founder of Des Moines Metro Opera and also kind of the head of the department at that time. And he was like, your place is here. And I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up there, and it was an incredible education because that department is primarily just singers. And we would put on 2 full operas a year plus scenes. And I got to assistant conduct and also work with Dr. Larson. And I would, be able to absorb. He was just a brilliant musician.
What's your favorite? I got to ask first.
Yeah.
What's your favorite opera? Because I'm a huge opera buff, by the way. I love opera. I've seen so many live operas. What's your favorite one?
Oh, I'm really bad at favorites.
Okay. Which one?
So, what is my favorite one? Well, I'll just answer what I answered when somebody asked my question when I was getting interviewed for a scholarship my senior year of high school from the Arts Association in Iowa. And I think it's just La Boheme.
Of course.
Because it's kind of everybody's favorite, but the music is so beautiful. And my favorite aria, Mi chiamo Nomini, it's how she's introducing herself to Rodolfo. And she talks about, I'm just little old me, but when the spring comes, my soul rises, and it's just so spiritual. And I think that is really
beautiful
in there. And I love accessible music too.
Yeah, beautiful.
What does that mean for you? Because it feels like Simpson kind of felt like home to you. And when you say accessible music, like what did you learn there that was so powerful about accessible music? Like how is that built into your own writing?
Well, it's a little bit different, I think, because, as a high schooler, I fell in love with the music that was more accessible, and then, but I did love singing really high notes and really loudly. And so my choir, I didn't have a voice teacher in high school because I grew up in Western Iowa, in Denison, Iowa. And so my choir director did the best he could to, give me, and he would say, okay, here, sing Puccini, here, sing Mozart's Hallelujah, here, sing Handel's Rejoice Greatly. And so when I got to college, I actually had a lot of vocal technique problems. So part of my process has been growing as a singer, up till now. But to answer your question, so when I got into college, I just loved the depth of complexity of the music in classical music, and the depth of the chords and colors, and how just emotionally driven that classical, especially opera, can be, and how it can just, you can feel the emotions just like in the,
Yeah, even if you don't
reverberating.
understand the language,
exactly.
you can
It's just
feel
the
it.
emotions were
Yeah.
so powerful to me. And so I really fell in love with opera at college.
Okay.
But throughout my career, I've done a lot of opera singing, and some musical theater singing, and a lot of church singing. But something about opera, just, you have to kind of really understand those chord structures. You have to be exposed to it, maybe at an early age, or you have to be brave and get yourself there, because it can be very off-putting. So when I started in on this project, I wanted to make music that was more accessible to the regular ears, except for that it has that big kind of grand emotional feeling with a little bit more color in my voice than maybe a normal pop singer
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. And music, at least for me, was a healing balm. I didn't know it at the time why all those hours I was sitting at the piano or practicing trumpet. It was healing the deep emotional current in me that I couldn't make sense of, or it was an outlet for me to get my emotions out because it wasn't safe to show those emotions in my home. And so this whole album that you've just created is about a healing journey. And I'd love for you to kind of take us through your process of healing and why music was so important.
Right. Yes, that the emotions of
Yeah.
music. That was in my philosophy of music education paper in college. That was kind of the most important thing for me, because of the power of music to be able to hold those emotions externally, and then we can actually, look at them and experience them together, communally. So that is really kind of the crux of this album, because in my healing journey, I was in the dark, and everything around me crumbled, and I realized the only thing that I could hold on to was this inner light within me. And I was really lonely. It was really,
Yeah.
really lonely when you kind of break everything apart, everything that to try to figure out what's true. And so that was my goal with this album, is to give people, or help people understand that this is how I felt emotionally through this process, so that they might feel less lonely. So that's why this first track starts actually with how I felt when I was in the depths of despair. This, I had a dream where, I was catapulted into space, and there was just blackness all around, and there was nothing, just nothing for me to hold on to. So, like in the first phrase, wishing for a branch to rescue me, but no one is there, no light externally. And so then I go into this kind of mantra deep within, down in my soul. I don't have to read you all things anyway.
We
The
can play a
idea
little
is,
clip
Yeah,
too.
we'll play a clip
play a
here.
little
yeah, the idea is then breathe, just breathe. Remember to breathe, because deep within I am free. So I think that's kind of like that. Once you get catapulted in that healing journey, it's not something that you just start yourself. You're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, just
No,
jump into the depths of despair.
the dark night of the soul.
Stay all the sides.
I'll deal with my dark night of the soul. So can we go back to how old were you when the dark night of the soul happened for you? And however much you want to share about that process, I think helps everyone, because I don't think anyone gets out of life without a dark night of the soul.
Yeah, I would say it was starting to rev up around 35. So in between 35, 36, 37 was kind of the beginning of it when I started, when I eventually got divorced. But then in the aftermath of that divorce, that's when things then started breaking up, and the healing process, which y'all talk about a lot, I'm sure, right? We have layer after layer after layer.
Yeah.
So then you start to, I think sometimes, like you said, during the process of divorce, and I'm a former divorce attorney, so I've more watched that from, not too big of a distance, pretty up close. But that actual process of divorce, we kind of think, oh, once the divorce is final, right? But the healing continues and really kind of begins.
Yes.
Because the new life begins, the new chapter begins. And so during that time, were you writing the album during that time, or the lyrics?
No.
Okay.
So I got divorced, and then the hardest part about the divorce for me was having to do shared care, because I had always put my career second over taking care of my kids. And because my mother's a my mother is a teacher and I'm a music educator, education was very important to me. So I said, well, if I'm gonna have kids, I don't want somebody else to raise them. I don't want to put them in daycare. I want to take care of myself. And so it was extremely painful for me when I realized that I was going to have to share my kids almost 50-50. And so from that, then I was working part-time as an adjunct at Kirkwood, teaching voice, and I needed to get a full-time job, says my attorney. And so I'd done lots of work in church music, so there was a full-time church music job that I got. And that started me into my healing process, looking at how my life had been constrained or built upon in the church. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big, big topic. And I think, both Kate and I have talked a lot about on this podcast being raised in pretty strict religious environments and our own process of moving through what that meant. And we both have agreed, you and I, on this in these conversations, that there are so many benefits.
Yep.
So many beautiful things that came out of it, and damage that you have to kind of integrate and make sense of. And then how do you hold both of them? That there was beautiful stuff, music, right? And
community.
there was painful,
community.
Judgmental pieces that that as a sensitive human, I know I really took to heart.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of messages.
A lot of mixed messages.
Yeah. Everything that is kind of exists in society as a, an entity, has damage, it's all built in there. So, for me, what was the most difficult is that not only are both my grandfathers preachers, but my dad's, of course, a preacher too. And I was raised in an extremely loving, wonderful home. But there was a serious cognitive dissonance with God the Father and then my dad, the preacher, who was this loving man, but he was a dad. He was a human. And then when I got into church music, I could kind of see the same thing with my bosses, who are the preachers. They get paid 3 times as much as me, and they have, a lot of power in the church. But I felt like I didn't have the same ability to have a voice in an equal way. And also, because I grew up singing, I could just feel that singing for me was God. It was this, I've always believed that when I sing, I'm channeling love or God or divine or whatever it is. I always imagine that when I'm singing, that it's just like this light pouring through me. So then when I got back after my divorce and I got back into church work, I started looking at the texts of the hymns differently. And it's kind of tricky because, God has always been considered God the Father, even though, probably pre-Christianity that was very, matriarchal and paganism and all that. But because, and at the roots of Christianity, it was very, both God, man and woman. I think it's just that those Gnostic gospels got lost,
and they got lost,
and Christianity got involved with the Roman Empire, and so because the Christianity got into that big, the Romans and the conquering, then the real essence of Christianity kind of got convoluted into kind of a man's power world.
The masculine took over.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And so, boy, once I really started looking at those.
That was a big rabbit hole, wasn't it?
Yeah. The hymn lyrics, some of them are, if you look at it in a certain way, can almost sound like abuse.
Yeah.
From a male perspective, or for a female.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I remember a point when I thought I programmed one more contemporary hymn, and I just loved it so much. And I was leading the whole congregation of 300, and I was singing it and singing it. And then later that week, I was doing my research, and I looked him up, the composer of that hymn, and I found out that he was a molester and an abuser.
Oh wow!
Of lots of women, and it had come out, and so his songs had started to be a bit controversial. But at that point, I think something broke in me, and I got so lividly angry. I haven't been that angry ever in my entire life, but there was a whole week where my anger knew no bounds. And I love the church. I love the community aspect. And where else do people come together every week and sing together?
I know.
It's the most healing thing for people to sing together. And so I had this real conflict, but I realized that all of this had happened because I was just destined to do something different. But leaving the church was a big grief.
I can imagine.
Huge grief.
I felt grief in it, but I also didn't have a lineage like you, a father, two grandfathers, and also your profession was really engaged in that community. And so I can imagine it was had to be a very heart-wrenching decision for you.
And I didn't really know how to find a community that wasn't in a church. Right. So, that's that all in the dark, lonely. Right. I actually went right before I got divorced, I actually moved here. And so from Memphis, Tennessee. So I actually didn't have the home church that I had before. I didn't have any friends. And it was kind of rocky between me and my parents because, divorce is not the best thing for Christians.
The church didn't really look very highly on it.
So I just didn't have anyone except for a wonderful counselor.
We all, those little angels show up, don't they?
They do when we need them.
That help us out.
Well, and it strikes me that really, in a very short time, you left two big relationships.
Huge.
So it's almost like
felt like I
divorce
left,
and divorce from the church.
Divorce from church, and then felt like I had to grieve my children because it really felt like I lost part of them,
Yeah.
So those three
You
things.
were in the dark night portal for how many years, would you say, as you think back? Because I think that's helpful for people too to realize that, like, when we go into that dark night of the soul, it often is, can be a pretty lengthy period.
Well, I'm still coming out of it. And so that would be maybe 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all have kind of abuse and trauma that we don't maybe even recognize. But once you recognize one and you take layers off, then you recognize more and more and more. And there's a long, long time where, and I still do, I have to deal with my PTSD and understanding that I'm not going to fit into a boxed situation anymore. So again, that's a lonely thing. It's a lonely thing.
It feels like your music then has kind of become, you've stepped into your own authentic way to sing and to bring this to the world, and even the topic by writing it yourself. You're no longer singing a song that a man wrote where the lyrics were harmful. You're creating all this yourself.
Right. And I'm also not singing in an opera where my voice has to sound a certain way, and it's not, written, the operas aren't written by a man, and classical music can be very constraining, and again is, dominated by men.
That's the wild woman.
She is. Like, you're getting yourself out of all the boxes, sister.
Yeah.
And then giving the gift to all of us with your words and your singing.
And that's what I wanted to say too. Thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable and share those things, because your story is not singular. There's so many women who've left marriages. There's so many women who have left the church. There's so many women who've left misogynistic sort of scenarios, and it's scary, and it feels lonely, and it's daunting, and
it's extremely daunting, financially and emotionally and intellectually. I went through also a period of like applying for a whole bunch of different jobs, and doors just got shut in my face, and I think because that's not what I was supposed to be doing.
Right, your path was elsewhere. It just took a little time to. It's also, your story is very brave. I just want to say that to you. It's very brave.
And that's because of my parents, but especially my mother. And she passed away last May. So, but she was probably the strongest woman I know. And she was just full of light and love and cared for everyone else. The only thing that she didn't do is take care of herself enough. But,
that generation didn't get
and
that
always
memo.
had a smile on her face and just was the most loving woman. She's my best friend.
Beautiful. Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Yoga Mama, which is all the many offerings I have blending psychological science with the ancient wisdom of yoga and mindfulness. Join me for a yoga class, a meditation weekend, an online course, Wisdom Wednesday, which is the first Wednesday of every month, or maybe even an international retreat like Greece in the fall of 2025. By providing spaces and experiences for people to look inward, it is my great honor to watch people become the change they wish to see in the world.
This podcast is being sponsored by Kate Moreland Coaching. As a transformational coach and an advocate for authenticity and well-being, I work to support individuals and organizations navigating challenging times. Whether you are an individual, a leader, or an organization, your creative power lies in your authenticity. Doing the work to understand your strengths and acknowledge the patterns and rocks that are in your way is the path to well-being. Whether it's your career or your relationship with yourself or others, transformational change begins within. To learn more, reach out to me at katemorelandcoaching.com.
So tell us about the process of writing the album, how long it took, what it was like, and then what kind of healing came forth for you through the writing and recording of these songs.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, I had been reading John O'Donohue. Incredible.
Love John O'Donohue.
And so I thought, I was like, maybe I'll just try. I love his blessing. It's like, it's in his to bless the space between us. And so I thought, well, let me just see if I can write a song because in the classical world, there's composers. And I
Mm.
was like, I'm not a composer. But I was like, I'll just see. And it was a very irregular text. So it kind of wound around. And so just every once in a while, I'd sit down and get a little bit of it. And finally, that was probably like a year at least. And then finally, one day I said, Mary Jane, just sit down and finish this song. So I did. And then I'd already been acquiring like the mic and this interface things to record. And so then I sat down and I recorded it and I put some echo on it and I listened back and I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And I had looked on John O'Donoghue's website and there was a place where you could fill out the rights to get the permission to record. So I filled it all out and sent the email, attached the music, and I got an email right back. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about your project before, but only his personal friends can set his words to music because I think he died early. And so his estate is.
Oh,
So that was like that final door slamming in the
Oh,
face.
I know. I was like,
I was
that's
like,
the
I want to hear
crescendo.
that
And then it's
song.
like, boom,
Yeah, I wish I could share it with
a
you.
man from the grave
Um,
says no.
and so that was the point when I was like, Mary Jane, you have got to start writing your own
Mm.
words.
Well, it's amazing that you weren't a songwriter, really. I mean, you've gone through all this music education,
And
you
yeah,
performed other people's
taught
music.
and taught voice lessons and, helped everyone else sing songs.
Yep.
Now you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, I started just writing. I got a special book and it wasn't just a journal. It was me and I would sit down and clear my mind and my healing, my healing energy definitely comes from my angels. And so I'd clear my mind and just see what the angels would tell me. And I just start writing just kind of what came to me. I tried as much as I could to just not make anything. And so I started that and ended up then they became poems. And in this process, in the healing process, it's really hard to find your voice, right? And especially if you've like come from abuse, or just, those very scary situations, it's really hard to put yourself out there. And so I would take one poem and I had like, 30 of my maybe voice students and people that I had on email list, and I would send one poem out like about once every other week. And that's all I did. That was
That's
nothing
great
else.
too, though.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
quite
it's-
scary.
it was just like-
And I sent it out. And then I kept doing that for about a year. And through that process, then I started kind of thinking about, okay, how can I write songs? Well, it turns out that a poem and song lyrics are very different.
Mm.
So then I started to write song lyrics, and then from there I tried then to record them, and I'd never done recording either. But I also the personal nature of this music and the ability for me to just take time and just kind of figure it out on my own is what motivated me to keep Googling to figure out the next step for, okay, how do I work this thing? How do I do this? And so, yeah, I first tried to record my piano, and that was really hard. And my piano doesn't sound nearly as good as like a pre-recorded Roland piano who's been sampled on a Steinway. And so I eventually made it to using electronic keyboard and then plugging that in. And I just kind of, I mostly had the songs written, but then I would go in and kind of arrange it and kind of layer it on my own as I was recording.
Amazing.
You did it your own way.
I did it my own way, all in my own
And
little home.
And I was thinking about another gift of the pandemic. How many things came out of that pandemic? Like that's when you started this project.
I started it, yeah. But the recording I definitely have done in the last year. And I would say that probably I've had the songs written. I finished them probably about a year ago. So it
Okay.
took me about a year to
Okay.
kind of
And now you're taking them out there and you're performing them.
Yes,
You've even got to tell us about what's coming up.
Oh, yes. So in July, I will be appearing at the National Women's Music Festival, which I actually went to last year just as a guest. And it was the most empowering experience ever, in a room full of women, with women on stage just singing their guts out and just sharing their souls. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And I took a songwriting class with Chris Williamson, who was kind of the first woman to make her own record label. And she still performs, has a following. And in that songwriting class, at one point, she offered the 12 of us, she's like, well, would anyone like to share their own song? And I was like, okay. This is last summer.
Courage, courage.
And,
Yes.
and I performed it, and everybody was just, well, you know each other, right? This was set up. No, no. And, and one woman right afterwards, she said, when you sang that song, I had to open my eyes because I thought I was levitating.
Wow.
And then and the other women, they have a emerging artist contest at this festival where three women kind of perform a few different times throughout the festival, and then they choose who gets to win. And so these women in the songwriting class like, well, you're going to apply to do that next year, aren't you? And so
You did?
I did. And I sent them my new music video, and I had a little Zoom audition on a concert, and they loved me. And so I'm very excited.
So that's this July.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Congratulations. That's really amazing.
It really
Look
is.
what you
I
manifested.
know. Yes. I imagined myself on that stage last year. So
And
here we
that's
go.
how it works. Yeah.
You just have to see it, and then you have to take the steps.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So my other manifestation for my performing is, let's see, the ninth track is called I Have a Voice. And to me, that's my theme song. I have a voice deep down, whispering within. I have a voice deep down, rising with my hymn. A voice of truth, a voice of pain, a voice of beauty, a voice of courage, a voice of love, a voice with dignity. And so someday I imagine being in an extremely large stadium with people all around me, all singing with me. I have a voice. So.
I want to be there when that
I
happens.
know. And it feels like it might be the battle cry. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but for women right now.
Yes.
And the empowerment of women and the need for us, patriarchy's definitely quelled our voice or shut it down. And so I think all of us are needing to find it.
Yes.
You're singing it. Yes. Kate and I are speaking it, but we all have to find it and then add it to the mix of what's going on in our world right now.
Yeah. And that's why 4 of my tracks are just very simple mantras that you can hum or sing along to, because that's the idea, is to.
That's the accessibility part, right?
Right. And the education part of, I believe firmly in not just giving someone a fish, but teaching them how.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interwoven in this as well.
It's beautiful.
You are so inspiring. And I think our listeners are going to love your music, and we're going to definitely put everything in the show notes.
But do you have a favorite track?
I don't have a favorite track, because they all are, they're all different purpose on that healing journey. My second track, I Am Worthy, is the melody came to me in my dreams, and it's just a mantra. Sacred is my pain, my body. Sacred is my truth, my wisdom, etc. That I think is very powerful for us to sing. And the one that kind of started it all off really is my own healing mantra, which is just, I am healing, I am wholeness, I'm light, I'm love. And that's what came to me when that last door got shut, slammed in my face when I was leaving the church. And I just laid on the couch, and I was just had no idea what to do, tears, and the sun was shining in my face, and it just kind of came to me. And so that one I kept singing to myself over and over again.
Beautiful. We do have a final question for you that we ask everyone. You have not only gotten outside of one box, you've gotten outside of many boxes, right? Like you've pushed your way through in out of these very contracted sort of places. And so you're such a beautiful example of the wild woman. So that's what she does, right?
Yeah.
She comes home to herself and she refuses to be possessed or boxed. And so we want to know what door you took to being a wild woman. And in the book by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Women Who Run with the Wolves, she talks about there are 4 doors that open for the wild woman. And we're curious if you went through one of them, all of them, or maybe you can crack open a new door if that's how you roll.
Yeah.
But
so if you have a deep scar, that is a door. If you have an old story, that is a door. If you love the sky and the water so much you can almost not bear it, that is a door. And if you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is a door.
Oh, all of them.
All right.
You know, thinking about, but what we haven't talked about yet was the door number 2, which was the ancestors, the old story. And for me, this project is not just my project, but this is a project of maybe my great grandmother. I have been, you know, like my grandmother telling me to have my first, you know, she taught
Time for
my
your
mother how
song.
to sing. Yeah. And there's just, I have been imagining in my healing process, when I feel lonely, I close my eyes and I imagine that I'm in this circle. And then I think about one woman that has, you know, been in my lineage or I've come across and she's holding my hand here. And then I think about another one on the other hand. And then I think about another one and another one until I can imagine this circle that I can't even see the whole exterior because it's so big. And for me, this project is all of those women and men that have, you know, shaped me and brought me to this point.
So beautiful. You are a bright soul. And you've gone through, and you said you're still kind of coming out of your healing. So it's so brave of you. And so I want to honor that, to share that as an artist. You know, the deepest pain is often the most beautiful work. And I think this is an example of that. So thank you for
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I can't wait to dig into your music. And I hope everyone listening checks it out as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary Jane.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Come back and rewild with us again next week.